People of the State of Michigan versus Tamala Peterson. Gary Markin, Jeffrey Allen Mosteller, this is Alita Harward Moffitt.
Days after the explosion, the defendant admitted to wiping her laptop. She lied to investigators to prevent access to video of the explosion in this case. And a previous investigation reveals that this defendant has told other IT tech in her business to wipe devices to essentially destroy evidence involved in other investigations. I would note that there are witnesses in this case who I and other investigators have personally spoken to that indicate that this defendant has bullied, threatened, harassed, humiliated, and filed lawsuits against people who, for lack of a better phrase, stand in the way of whatever it is she wants to do.
The actual hyperbaric chamber that this young boy died in was past 20,000 cycles a few years ago.
Our investigation has led us to the conclusion that one of the co-defendants in this case was actively tampering with this particular hyperbaric chamber, and all of the evidence leads us to the conclusion that it was done with the permission and perhaps at the order of this defendant. And one of the things that the people turned up in their investigation is that in the most recent, evaluation of this particular chamber, the number of cycles was less than had been previously recorded. So obviously, Judge, there's, it's very clear what's going on here. And as I said, the people have spoken to a number of witnesses who can and will testify to that fact.
These proffer about threatening people or wiping this, there's no obstruction of justice charged here. There's no, and if that had occurred, we'd see a count for obstruction of justice. 2 weeks ago, I told the Detroit Police Department, if charges come, we'll appear voluntarily. No need to go arrest her. We'll present her to the court. We'll present her to the police department. Apparently that wasn't good enough for the Detroit Police Department, and I respect the detectives. But all they had to do was call me, and we'd be standing here voluntarily. Instead, we're in a box being recorded by the media. And I take issue with that, and I've raised that with the Attorney General's office already. We would have appeared voluntarily.
He was literally making this a ticking time bomb. That's what his actions were doing. This defendant was the, for lack of a better phrase, safety officer at the Oxford Center, which is something considering the way that this facility was being operated. As the court is aware, multiple safeguards were being disregarded knowingly. The investigation showed that this defendant was conducting his own experiments to try and prove the safety as it relates to this particular chamber. Judge, obviously these were his own experiments, none of which were actually recognized by any sort of scientific body. They were not peer reviewed. The people's position is they were just designed to hide the actual safeguards that were being disregarded, that these experiments were meant to show the under-employees that what they were doing was safe, because look at these experiments that he conducted.
Had a grounding line been employed, had the tally for how many cycles of this chamber not been altered, it read less than it did in 2022. This child would be alive today. In my mind, that is an individual that runs a business entity with the goal of making money and throwing safety and caution to the wind. But what I can't get beyond is an individual whom the allegation suggests would put a person at risk of harm by simply not adhering to standard safety protocols and tampering with the reading of this particular chamber. The history of Ms. Peterson troubles me as it relates to impeding investigations. If this is how this operation is being run, I'm so relieved that this hasn't happened before. I'm horrified for the family, and I'm not going to call it tragic because, again, I don't think that's the correct term. I think this was foreseeable. What I'm going to do at this point in time is set her bond in the amount of $2 million, $250,000, cash surety, no 10%,